What's going on, everyone? Okay, so to start today off, I kind of want to talk about something because Hitbox tweeted out that their new cross-up controllers are going to be legal at EVO now. So if anyone doesn't know what the cross-up is, the cross-up was like essentially you take a Hitbox, a normal Hitbox arcade stick, and like a normal arcade stick. I don't know what a Hitbox is. Essentially what it is kind of like playing like on a keyboard where instead of a joystick on a traditional arcade stick, it's now buttons for inputs. You know what I mean? It's buttons to hit directions instead of necessarily like an analog joystick that people are used to. Anyways, so Hitbox tweeted out all this stuff, or that EVO now has ruled that Hitbox cross-ups are now going to be tournament legal, and I just wanted to go over the rules a little bit and what sort of like impact that has, because it's actually like a really huge controversial topic as far as like controllers and the uses of them go. Because I remember when the Hitbox first got announced, a lot of people, even myself, at one point was like, we need to ban this immediately. Because it essentially allows you to use the joystick of an arcade stick, which we're all used to, and also the directional buttons of a normal Hitbox or a keyboard, something like that. And that's kind of crazy. What do you think about it? There's actually a video I can pull up for it. I think I have it somewhere. Hold up. Anyways. Let's just watch this real quick. This will actually show you exactly what a cross-up is. It's a really cool thing. I kind of want one just because. You can see that it has a normal joystick right here. That's the normal joystick. And then these three buttons on the top and this button here are going to be directional inputs. God damn, these things look so... They look like they're cheating. Anyone that uses these probably is a cheater. I guarantee it. But it's been deemed that it's legal. Look how easy that is to backdash. He's just holding back and then doing down, back, down, back, down, back. Or is he holding... He's either holding back or down, back. One or the other. But, like, that's how easy it is now to do it. So, anyways, back to the EVO rules. Because we don't need to watch this whole thing. This is just going to show you how the cross-up works. You guys get the idea. Essentially, it is a hitbox and a normal arcade stick all mashed up into one thing. It looks kind of ridiculous, and I can see why people were so angry and adamant that this needs to be banned immediately. Anyways, Hitbox tweets out that EVO has declared that hitboxes or cross-ups are now okay, including the Smash box, but I don't play Smash, so I don't know enough about that. So anyways, here's the Google Docs that EVO released, basically explaining the rules, and then this is just going to go through blah, 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 all like the legal terms that they use. Anyways, so we get to the rules, and its controllers at EVO are tournament legal so long as they abide by the rules below. 1. A controller may not active multiple game inputs from a single input mechanism. This includes both chorded, i.e. A and B together, and sequential, i.e. A followed by B inputs. In-game assignment of multiple inputs to a single button are of course allowed. Cardinal directions, up, down, left, and right, are specifically excluded from this ruling except as noted in Rule 3 below. It's okay to have a lever which sends the down and right input which, when held in a certain direction. Down and right are both cardinal directions and therefore can be activated simultaneously by a single input mechanism. It's okay to be using an in-game controller settings of a game to assign multi-input functions for a single button on a player controller, i.e. pushing R2 to activate 3 punches. So that stuff's okay. That's fine. It gets a little bit trickier when you start doing stuff where it says it's not okay. The rewiring a push button inside a controller to simultaneously push 3 other buttons and send 3 punch inputs. One input mechanism activation may not be sending multiple game inputs. So basically, there used to be a thing, like to give an example about this, there used to be a way that people would wire their arcade sticks to plank jab and select back in like Street Fighter 4. And what that would do is give you 2 jab inputs, and that was the only way you could plank jabs. Basically what they're saying is that's illegal now. You can't do that. It's not okay for a push button that activates hardware macros, which sends a series of inputs, or of game inputs at a specific timing. So basically no turbo mode, which we already know that's not a thing you're allowed to do anyways. So that's not really too big of a thing. And an analog push button which sends either a game input of A or B depending on how hard it's pressed. So you can't have specific buttons that if you press like 85% of the way, it'll give you a punch, and if you press all the way, it'll give you a kick. That's pretty easy to understand. Nothing really crazy there. Basically just telling you if you press a punch button, it better do punch. And if you assign a button that'll do punch and kick or something like that, then it better do that. You can't have a button that'll have multiple inputs. Which is okay. We already know that's a thing. And no turbo modes, you fucking cheaters. I fucking hate turbo. I had an arcade stick that like had that ability. I never use it. Shit's stupid. Alright, so the second rule is controllers may send analog game inputs from an analog input mechanism or digital input system mechanisms as long as it does not violate rule number 1. It's okay for a push button when pressed to send a game input of an analog stick is 75% to the right. So, analog sticks are okay, is essentially what it's saying. It's okay for 2 push buttons, A and B, that produce different analog inputs depending on whether one or the other or both are held, i.e. the right analog R2 analog input is about 25% held when A is pressed 50% held and B is pressed 100% down when both A and B are pressed. Okay, wait, hold up. We need to reread that again. 2 push buttons, A and B, that produce different analog inputs depending on whether one, the other, or both are held. E.g., the R2 analog game input is held at 25% when A is pressed 50% and when B is pressed 100%. So, essentially, from what I'm understanding about that, is just 2 buttons being pressed and doing an analog input. Either way, like, that's okay. It's not okay, though, for a push button when pressed that will sweep the analog stick from 100% left to 100% right in over 1 second. This violates rule number 1 by sending multiple analog inputs from a single input mechanism activation. So, okay, that kind of makes sense. Alright, 3. The controller may not... This is actually the important one, by the way. This is the important one that really relates to Hitbox controllers, because this is actually part of the Daigo thing that happened a little bit back. Rule number 3. Controller may not send simultaneously opposite cardinal directional inputs or game inputs. SODC includes left up or left plus right, up plus down. This typically is enforced by adding cleaning firmware to the controller, which removes one of the inputs before passing the game. Stock gamepads, i.e. the PlayStation DualShock 4, are explicitly exempt from this rule. This ruling will be removed on April 30th, 2020. Okay, whatever. They're going to be changing that. It's okay for a lever which sends the downright inputs when held in a certain position. This is specifically allowed by the SACD ruling. It's not okay for a push button when pressed to send L plus R inputs. L plus R are not adjacent cardinal directions, therefore cannot be bound to a single button. And it's not okay for a player to mod his fight stick to add an additional input press R without adding an SOCD cleaner. The player can hold L on the lever and then hold this new button that also sends the R game inputs. Since this results in sending SOCD inputs, the stick is not tournament legal in 2020. This will become tournament legal after April 31st, 2021. So, alright. This one is essentially saying you can't have a push button that holds left and right, or left and right inputs. The reason why that's a thing, or the reason why this whole rule even exists, is because, for example, let's say you're playing a charge character like Guile. On Daigo's Hitbox that he made, he didn't have SOCD, cleaning firmware, as they're calling it. So basically, he could hold back indefinitely, right? And then anytime he wanted to throw a sonic boom, he'd just press right and a punch. Same time, right and punch. And because he's holding back, he's always constantly keeping a charge, which is the way the game's reading that, is constantly a back input. And then when it does left and right, because there's no SOCD cleaning firmware, it's still reading there's a back input and a forward input. So he's actually always constantly maintaining a charge. The way hitboxes work is when you press left and right at the same time for those directional inputs, it'll actually result in a neutral input. So that's how they are legal currently. Basically, the next part is the player modding their fight stick, so an additional button can be pressed. An additional button to press R without adding an SOCD cleaner. The player can hold left on the lever and hold this new button and also send the R game input. Since this results in sending SOCD inputs in the game, the stick is not tournament legal in 2020. So currently right now that's illegal. So if I'm holding left on a stick and then I hit a button that hits R and it sends left and right inputs, that is currently illegal, but they are planning on changing that in 2021 apparently, according to this. EVO suggests that fighting game developers take these rules into account when they're designing the game. For example, a game designer may determine that going from down to up should require at least one frame of neutral to add the game log and add game logic to enforce this, i.e. the sequence down, 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 up, up, up is transferred to down, 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 neutral, up, up by software in-game. So, basically, I think there's no more rules after this. Oh, actually, alright, so applying rules to existing devices. We don't need to talk about developers, or what EVO suggests for developers to do. So that's not really, like, pertinent to the conversation. 8. So, applying the rules to the existing device, the Hitbox cross-up under active development remats input mechanisms found on a stock controller to different locations on the device. Specifically, the left analog stick is remapped to a lever on the left side of the device. The digital D-pad buttons have been moved to the right side of the device. An SOCD cleaner, which prevents sending left and right up plus down simultaneously, since the Hitbox cross-up avoids violating Rule 3 by implementing an SOCD cleaner and does not send multiple inputs. This is a tournament-legal device. That's the big one I want to cover. Because a lot of people were, like, worried that this Hitbox, or this cross-up, is going to be cheap. That they're worried that there's going to be some, like, shenanigans going on with this. I can kind of see why. Because the way that this is set up, this will actually make playing the game way easier. There's no arguing that. The way that this is set up is if you were to take an arcade stick and a keyboard, mash it together, and have, like, this weird Frankenstein of a controller to use. And there's a lot of people that think that this isn't necessarily cheating, that it's just innovation, which I'm kind of really on the fence on it. I want to see how this stuff works out. Are there advantages to using a Hitbox? Oh, fuck yeah. There's plenty of advantages to using it. But, like even learning stick, right? There's still, like, that whole learning curve. It's just a different curve. There are advantages to using it, i.e. instead of all the travel that you get with like the lever on an arcade stick, you don't have that. You have a button that you just press. So there's no travel. The same thing actually really works with controllers. In fact, actually, this is a really good time to talk about this too while I'm here. Anytime you are learning a fighting game, there is no reason why you can't learn a fighting game on pad, why you need to learn it on stick, why you need to learn it on a Hitbox, why you need to learn it on a cross-up, whatever your choice of controller to learn a fighting game. There is no need for you to be like, I can't play X fighting game because I'm playing on this controller type or whatever you're using. People play arcade stick, top players play on pad, top players play on hitboxes, top players even use keyboards in some cases. I mean, like, keyboard's realistically a hitbox. There's just, you have to recognize that there are advantages and disadvantages to both. I can actually show you this. Here is a god-awful pad. Alright? But this will actually be a pretty good example. This has its advantages to it. Namely, in the directional inputs. Where are they? That was fucking hard. Alright, so, and normally when you're doing Korean backdashing, you have to go back, back, down, back. Right? Right. On an arcade stick, there's a whole fuck ton of travel with the stick. You have to go back to neutral, down, back. There's not a lot. Like, realistically, there's not a lot of travel time from the stick to go all the way to the back of the gate, back to neutral, to the back of the gate again, to back to neutral, to down, back on the gate. There's not really a whole lot of time, but it's way more than just pressing a button on this. I hit that button, it is instantaneous. Because of that, that is the advantage of pad. Plus, that's loud, right? Versus, there's some silence to this. So this is much quieter than an arcade stick. This also has inputs, or directional inputs that are done almost simultaneously. And there's not really a whole lot of travel time. It's really just sliding your thumb to whatever direction you want to press. That's where the advantages of pad come in. The disadvantages of it are that arcade sticks were not designed around this. Or arcade fighting games, most fighting games in general really, are not designed around this. This is not the control that they designed their games around. It's not as bad nowadays, but back in the days of like Street Fighter 4, Marvel vs. Capcom, stuff like that, most fighting games were not designed with the player using that in mind. It was doable because there was top players. Luffy played on a PlayStation 1 pad. We've already talked about that. Smug played on a wired Xbox 360 controller. Talked about that. A lot of people, I think even Snake Eyes, played on a fight pad. Or one of those Mad Catz fight pads. He didn't play stick, I know that. These are top players that weren't using an arcade stick. So it is possible, but it just has its own learning curve. Now when you go over to something like an arcade stick, you have already the advantage that some games were designed around the use of an arcade stick. Meaning the inputs that you do, let's say for Tekken for instance, like 2, 3, and 1 and 4. That's a lot easier to do on an arcade stick than it is to do on a pad, just because of the way that the buttons are laid out. Just because the buttons are bigger, it's usually more comfortable on the hand that is doing the inputs to press it like that, and you have access to, instead of just using your thumb or playing a weird claw style, you have access to 3 fingers and a thumb. It's just a little bit easier to hit inputs. The downside to that, arcade sticks are loud. We just discussed that. You have travel time with your directional inputs due to the fact that you have to use a stick. And on top of that, it's learning a whole completely different thing. Because a lot of people have like the misconception that you have to use an arcade stick because it's better, or you have to use a hitbox because it's better. There's really just advantages and disadvantages to all of them. I do think, though, that hitboxes take the advantage of almost instantaneous directional inputs and the comfortability of pressing like punch buttons or action buttons in general on an arcade stick. That kind of just like molds it all together. You know what I mean? Hitboxes are like a little bit better than a normal arcade stick. But, you know, there's a learning curve to that. Even the cross-up. This thing looks cheap as shit. Alright? It is a hitbox and an arcade stick all in like this weird Frankenstein thing. I think that that's going to still be hard to use too. I think that there's the panic that has come from this arcade stick, or this weird like amalgamation of like controller, arcade stick, keyboard. I think that it has a lot of people more nervous than it really needs to. It's going to make stuff a lot easier because on a hitbox you can do stuff that I would say isn't necessarily possible on an arcade stick. Like, I think you actually can dash, like, side dash left or some shit out of crouch in Tekken, which is technically impossible on a stick, but on a hitbox, it's completely possible. Just because the way the direction inputs are. Ugh, excuse me. Like I said, I don't think people really are, like, it's like something new came out, technology-wise, and everyone's, like, grabbing their pitchforks and torches and being like, get it out of here! You know, like, this is innovation, and people are afraid of that. Because a lot of people are mad at people like Super Akuma for playing on like a hitbox. People are pissed about that shit, you know what I mean? Like, oh my god, chill. They're, like, people think that they need to get banned, but I think the only time it really needs to get banned, but Eva already covered this, the only time I really feel like a hitbox is, like, kind of cheap is when you have the ability to hold back, right? And just endlessly have a charge, and then you can still press forward, and that count is like simultaneous input. So like the game will, so like if you were to hold back and just press forward and punch, and you're playing a charge character in Street Fighter, you can just chuck fireballs all day. Or sonic booms all day. You can just keep doing that. But they banned that. So realistically, is there really much for you to complain about as far as using a hitbox? I don't know. It's kind of like a weird subject. I'm on the fence about this one in particular, because this just seems like it's kind of cheap, but they considered it tournament legal now. That is like officially tournament legal from Mr. Wiz himself. Realistically, I'm probably just going to get one, honestly, just to compete, or just be able to compete with people that are using it. There's really no point in not doing it. Plus, I do have to admit, that thing looks pretty fucking sweet. That is one good looking arcade stick. I think my Hori looks awesome. Now look at this. This is pretty. That looks clean as hell. I love that cross up. I'm actually thinking about getting a hitbox just because. Real talk though, All right, let's go boot up Tekken.